Even Republicans are calling for Donald Trump to stop using the Department of Justice and its Attorney General as just an extension of his political campaign, extension of his private criminal defense team, that it needs to be, in the words of a Republican, a serious man or woman to bring, again, some sort of esteem and credibility back to the Department of Justice. But is that who Donald Trump is focused on for the replacement of Pam Bondi? No. I'll answer it right here. That immortal question, is Donald Trump going to grow a brain and morality and ethics in time to pick an appropriate attorney general? That answer, you know the answer to that. It's no. You're here on MeidasTouch and on Legal AF. I'm Michael Popok. Let's get down to where we're at. Donald Trump went through 5 attorneys general in his first term. 5. Started with Jeff Sessions, ended with Jeffrey Clark, with Bill Barr and others in the middle. So it should come as no surprise that 16 months into his administration, he fired Pam Bondi. Of course, the open question is, who else is going to be fired next? Will Kash Patel, the FBI director, who is as or more incompetent than Pam Bondi, will he be fired? There's rumors that that's coming in the next 30 days. We just saw Kristi Noem be fired. And others are rumored to be on their way out as Donald Trump tries to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic leading into the midterms. We focus on the attorney general position. The person that wants it, the person who's probably, even though I disagree with him on every aspect of his position taking within the administration, but the only adult in the room is Todd Blanche, the number 2, the deputy attorney general, the guy that spent years in the U.S. Attorney's Office, knows his way around federal practice. Love him or hate him, he did get Donald Trump out from under a series of criminal cases when he was his criminal defense lawyer. Again, don't agree with his policies, but in terms of somebody who could actually run the office and not be a political hack, it could be Todd Blanche. Again, don't like what he did in the Epstein matter, the Epstein cover-up. Don't like the fact that he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell to try to get her a pardon. And I've seen a lot of weakness in character about Todd Blanche. The MAGA don't trust Todd Blanche. They think he is a Democrat. They think he is not loyal enough to the president. They see the position as being a political hack position. Here's Kurt Gowdy, a Republican, talking about what's necessary in the next pick for the attorney general, somebody that Donald Trump will never consider. Play the clip.
Yeah, Brett, good facts make good lawyers. And if you're getting a no bill, if the grand jury is rejecting an indictment, then you got no chance of winning at trial. Todd Blanche is a real lawyer. He's a real litigator. Lee Zeldin would do a great job. John Radcliffe, which is not a name you hear, and he will kill me for mentioning his name, but John Radcliffe would be a great AG. He's got people to pick from. We gotta change our expectations of the attorney general. That's not an extension of a political operation. It should be a serious man or woman who follows the facts. And we got to get the politics out of the department.
Now, let's think about the people that Donald Trump is considering instead of Todd Blanche. Because if he wanted to pick Todd Blanche, I guess he could be picked again. But he's only been announced as the interim acting attorney general. In the same breath, Donald Trump could have said, and I'm going to be putting his nomination up for the attorney general position, but he did not. Now, we don't know exactly what happened behind closed doors. We do know that Donald Trump, as he rode over to the Supreme Court for oral argument in birthright citizenship case, he rode along with Pam Bondi and fired her along the way. I mean, that's some cold shit right there, but we know it happened. Let me go through the potential candidates that Donald Trump may have on his short list. Now, sometimes we get the short list wrong. When we heard a year and a half ago that Aileen Cannon, the judge in Miami, was being considered for attorney general, and she was at the top of the list, and that was leaked by the Trump administration and never retracted, or Trump transition team and never retracted, we did not think Matt Gaetz was the next natural pick. We had other people in mind. Todd Blanche was already there on the org chart at number 2. We thought maybe he would just be elevated up. And then wild card, Matt Gaetz had a little problem with child sex trafficking allegations and couldn't make it over the finish line. Then we thought, well, let's go through the list. And one person on the list was Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. Why? Because his term limited out in Florida. He can't run again. And Trump, even though he was a rival of Trump for the nomination, he's sort of fallen in line doing all of Trump's bidding. You see, Ron DeSantis' own attorney general, some 30-year-old lawyer I'd never heard of, who is constantly promoting the agenda to try to get the attention of the Trump administration. Ron DeSantis, at least a lawyer, a Marine. I don't like anything about him or his policies. I think he's a weasel. I think the more you get to know Ron DeSantis, the less you like him. But if you're going to give him a job and maybe set him up for 2028, then you would give him the attorney general job, a job, though, he was already passed over for once. But he's not going to restore confidence and that this is no longer that this is an independent Department of Justice that is free from corruption and Donald Trump's capture. That's not Ron DeSantis. So let's turn to Lee Zeldin. That's worse, I think. Lee Zeldin, a little-known congressman from Long Island, who Donald Trump elevated to be the EPA administrator, Environmental Protection Agency, after he lost a race to Kathy Hochul to be the governor of New York. He has been, EPA is, it's important, right? He's supposed to be protecting us from dirty air and dirty water. Instead, he's just totally dismantled the Environmental Protection Agency, put them firmly in the back pocket of big oil and big coal and big fossil fuel, and he's wrecked the regulatory scheme in every way, shape, or form. And when he's not doing that, he's out promoting Donald Trump's political agenda. He is a lawyer. He went to Albany Law School. I get it. He was primarily a military lawyer, has no federal court experience or Supreme Court experience, wasn't a federal law clerk, didn't clerk at the United States Supreme Court, wasn't a U.S. attorney and the like. At best, he worked in military tribunals for court-martial and other things, completely different body of law, completely different procedure. But Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He just wants somebody that can do his political bidding. If he cared about experience and acumen and ability, he wouldn't have put Lindsay Halligan in at one of the top-rated U.S. attorney's offices in the Eastern District of Virginia and have her then have to resign in disgrace. Or Alina Habba, with no prosecutor experience, to be the short-term disgraced U.S. attorney for New Jersey. Or put John Sarconi to be the short-lived U.S. attorney in the Northern District of New York. He doesn't care about that. That's why Lee Zeldin makes perfect sense from Donald Trump's world, although it doesn't satisfy what Gowdy is looking for in the next replacement. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of MeidasTouch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way. back to Todd Blanche for a minute. Todd Blanche got sideways with MAGA mainly because he told people inside the Department of Justice there were just some things he was unwilling to do, that he would not stoop that low to go after weak cases against Donald Trump's political rivals or against Antifa, whatever that's supposed to be. And he just refused. And a lot of people in the Trump world actually blame the not outgoing, now disgraced Pam Bondi, but Todd Blanche. In fact, a guy named Peter Ticketon, who was Donald Trump's high school military academy roommate and does all the dirty work in law and cases that others won't touch for Donald Trump. He had this to say about Todd Blanche recently.
Unfortunately, we're not getting the cooperation that we need. The one that is running things now in the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi sits at the head of it, but the COO, so to speak, the person who actually runs it, is Todd Blanche. And Todd Blanche is failing on all measures. Because of him, we haven't had a pardon granted since May. Because of him, he wants the J6ers to not be compensated for all that we put them through. Because of him, we're not getting the things that we need for Dominion machines, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this guy used to be, until January 4th, 2024, he was a Democrat, a registered Democrat. And then he represented Donald Trump on the Stormy Daniels case that any Democrat would have done the same job. But I don't know that this leopard ever changed its spots, because for some reason, everything that needs to be going forward in order to make Donald Trump's presidency work is being stalled intentionally by this man. And it's not because of ineptitude. This is a smart guy. This is a very capable guy. And it's not because he's not capable. It's because he's intentionally doing things the opposite of what Donald Trump has ordered to be done.
Now, when I heard that, I said, uh-oh, that's Ticketon on behalf of Donald Trump trying to destabilize Todd Blanche. It was like a loyalty test. So if Todd Blanche telling people internally there's just some things he won't stoop down to, the question is who will stoop that low? And I think a guy like Lee Zeldin certainly would. And we're not trying again to restore any type of confidence in the American people in the credibility or the ethics or the independence of the Department of Justice. Then you have another rumored person is Jeanine Pirro. Again, worse. Who would stoop that low to answer Todd Blanche's question? Jeanine Pirro, a political hack of the first order with no federal prosecutor experience that's been busy prosecuting cases that she shouldn't, being rejected by grand juries and judges in the District of Columbia as the U.S. attorney. She'd been, I don't want to say Judge Judy, but she had been on Fox and Friends and Fox. She'd been the Westchester County state prosecutor, in New York for years. Her husband had a little bit of a corruption problem, a little bit of a bribery issue, but always loyal to Donald Trump, always doing his bidding on Fox, and got the U.S. attorney position. And she's now been busy going after Donald Trump's political targets like Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell. And when she didn't get her way and a federal judge, Boasberg, ended the criminal prosecution, finding there was absolutely no evidence, she went nuts. Here's Jeanine Pirro, who could be the U.S. attorney. Play the clip.
Jerome Powell today is now bathed in immunity, preventing my office from investigating the Federal Reserve. This is wrong, and it is without legal authority. And so this decision today by Judge Boasberg runs directly afoul of our highest court's admonition that courts and judges must not and cannot saddle grand juries with mini trials and preliminary showings that impede a prosecutor's investigation and thus frustrate the public's interest in the fair and expeditious administration of justice. No one, folks, is above the law. And this outrageous decision will be appealed by the United States Department of Justice.
Okay, so you got that. This seems now there could be a wild card. Let me focus on one in particular, Aileen Cannon. Okay? Aileen Cannon, who Donald Trump wanted to reward for her hard work as his personal judge in dismissing the Mar-a-Lago indictment against Donald Trump for espionage and obstruction of justice, and firing effectively special counsel Jack Smith under her wacky interpretation that's never been done in 200 years of the Constitution in terms of the appointment and confirmation necessary for a special counsel. She was on the short list when they came into office. She's also rumored to be on the short list, get ready, for the United States Supreme Court. And everybody's seen everything she's done since as her tryout for the United States Supreme Court. You know, she handled one of the attempted assassins of Donald Trump and sentenced him to life imprisonment. She did the Mar-a-Lago case when she should have recused herself. She's right now presiding over a grand jury proceeding against, 130 people in a grand conspiracy to try to take Donald Trump down in 2016 and 2020. That's being run out of the Southern District of Florida office. I think he doesn't elevate her to attorney general. He leaves her as judge because he needs her down in Florida while he's still in office. And later, if there's an opening on the United States Supreme Court, I can't believe my mouth is forming these words, he considers Aileen Cannon. She's definitely high up on the list. Which brings us to another Florida person. Donald Trump likes to pick Florida people for his attorney general. I think the current attorney general of Florida is too young for the job, even for Donald Trump. Matt Gaetz is out. We just talked about Pam Bondi, who is a Florida lawyer, who was an attorney general down in Florida, being picked for the United States attorney general. What about this guy in the Southern District of Florida, Jason Quinones, Jason Redding Quinones? Nobody ever heard of him. He was a short-term judge on the Miami State Circuit Court down in Florida, and then had been in the military, had been in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but apparently was a C student at best and was not promoted properly, and is now the U.S. Attorney running around doing all of Donald Trump's bidding against his political targets. Military guy, I think he was in the Marine Corps, state court judge, U.S. attorney, friends with people like Ed Martin, who used to be the head of the Donald Trump's weaponization committee in the Department of Justice. He's got the credentials and bona fides by way of MAGA to be accepted by the Laura Loomers of the world. So I'm going to keep a close eye on him. Ron DeSantis, we talked about. Lee Zeldin probably is in the lead, but don't be surprised if I get on here and talk about one of these five or somebody else completely that hasn't been vetted at all that will take over for the Department of Justice. I think Todd Blanche has got about a 20% chance. I think Lee Zeldin's got about a 50% chance, and the rest of the people fall in behind that. But we'll follow it right here on the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. Come over to Legal AF, hit the YouTube subscription button, help us continue to grow that pro-democracy channel. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.